In one of the richest countries in the world, each night children are going hungry. How does this happen? How did we even get here? Well, in this video, I'm going to kind of explain, some of the intricacies of hunger in America. I want to really shed light onto the suffering and the struggling out there when it comes to foods and being able to feed children and even adults. So there's a term that I learned years ago called food insecurity, And I learned this term when I worked for the Texas Department of Agriculture. I worked in the Food and Nutrition Division, where the purpose was to receive federal funds to be distributed to the state to try to fill gaps of hunger for folks who just don't have enough food to last throughout the month, or kids who don't have access to nutritious or healthy foods. I will tell you that food insecurity is it's something that I'm all too familiar with working with kids. Here in Texas, just like other states, they have a program called the Summer Feeding Program. And it's sponsored by the federal government. The federal government provides monies to the states to give the kids so they can be fed in the summer times. Now, the interesting thing, this is the reason they do this for the summertime, because oftentimes folks, going through food insecurity and hunger, particularly kids, the only time they really have to eat is when they're in school, especially if the household is not bringing enough money to have adequate foods throughout the month or throughout a certain period to make sure the child is healthy. And so oftentimes school is when the children and the parents can look forward to the child getting at least one nutritious meal. Now, imagine in the summertime when school is out and there are no meals at the schools and the households can't afford to provide the necessary foods for the children. This is where the federal government comes in and subsidizes food programs for children. And they call it Summer Feeding Program. They have sites that you can operate within communities and areas where you feed children. And the requirement is you have to feed children certain nutritious meals. There has to be a certain portion sizes. And there's an age limit for the child, obviously. And also the children have to be fed in a safe environment. So these are some of the things the federal government is trying to do or have tried to do to try to deal with the issue of food insecurity. But food insecurity is real. It's real. It's limited access to food. It's uncertainty about food availability. It's nutritional inadequacy. It's socially acceptable acquisition of foods. And what I mean by that is folks who get foods from non-traditional ways, like digging through trash cans. You know what I'm saying? And then also you talk about the impact on health and impact on children. Food insecurity, it's brutal. It can be brutal. It's one thing to go hungry each night, but it's also another thing to not have the proper nutritious meals in your stomach to make sure your body is healthy. So oftentimes you'll find folks who are struggling with food insecurity also have health ailments. And that's one thing that for me is, it breaks my heart to know that children, through no fault of their own, oftentimes don't have enough food to eat. And this is a time within their lives when nutritious foods are very important to the developmental stages of the child. It's so important. So food insecurity is a real issue. It's a real issue. We talk about families living payday to payday. Some families don't even make it that far with food. Some don't make it that far with food. Some families each month only have maybe 1 week of food for the month that they have to try to stretch out. And toward the end of the month, they have to try and find some other way to supplement, try to get more food into the home. But it's a real thing. It's not just living payday to payday. It's surviving payday to payday. And I can honestly tell you that my own history, I've dealt with food insecurity as a child. I didn't grow up with a silver spoon in my mouth. I grew up poor. We grew up poor. And my parents struggled, my grandparents struggled, my family struggled. But we also made sure that the children ate as much as we could. We made sure the children ate. Hell, even if it was just something simple, to put in our stomach, watermelon or something like that, fruit. They made sure the children ate. And we didn't eat the most healthiest food when I was growing up. Everybody heard of bologna, bolo. That's basically trash meat. But, growing up, that's some of the tastiest thing you could eat on a sandwich with mustard. You know what I'm saying? But real talk, food insecurity is a real thing. It's a real thing. People are not only struggling with the economy and with just, job market, people are struggling with food. There are a lot of folks out there who, survive on ramen noodles and things like that. Nothing wrong with ramen noodles. I mean, you do what you need to do to make sure you have, proper food in your stomach. There are folks out there that are eating stuff that's just really bad for you, but they have no choice. They have no choice because of food insecurity, because of economic situations, their financial situations. And a lot of times it's educational too, because oftentimes people don't know what healthy foods are. That's a real issue. Some folks don't know what healthy foods are. So food insecurity causes so much havoc. It wrecks homes. Again, it's nothing new. It's always been there, but I think it's gotten much worse. The homeless crisis has gotten worse. Joblessness has gotten worse. People are doing mass layoffs. The tariffs. Of course, it's going to have an impact on the amount of food a family gets into the home and gets into that child's belly. And so I think we need to be mindful of the issues that are taking place in America, one of the most richest countries in the world, where we have this serious crisis with food insecurity. And no one should have to, go through a night of sleep without having food in their stomach. Especially no child should have to go through a night of sleep with no food in their stomach, The U.S. Department of Agriculture actually has labels they put on food insecurity. And they have it's weird because they have actually categories of food insecurity that they have. Depending on best case scenario to worst case scenario. One, they have high food insecurity. High food insecurity is when no problems or worries about acquiring adequate food exists. That's high food security. High food security. You don't have a problem with getting food. You're getting food every day. You're getting enough food. Your children are getting enough food. So that's high food security. The U.S. Department of Agriculture goes on to say marginal food security. Marginal food security. That's when some problems with acquiring adequate food, but the quality of food is not compromised. Again, this is problem with acquiring adequate food, but the quality of the food is not compromised. So it's not like you're getting unhealthy food, but you're just not having access to the food, any food, healthy or not. That's another issue. That's marginal food security. So you're just not having access to the foods. Low food security. Low food security. This is when the quality of the food diet is reduced, but food intake is not significantly reduced. Let me repeat that again. The quality of the food diet is reduced, but the intake of food is not reduced. And what that means, the hunger is not going to go away, but the intake of low quality foods increases. Because you can only eat what you can afford, and so oftentimes on the lower end of the dollar scale, man, you're going to get some of the cheaper foods. It's unfortunate. That's where we live in. But I think to address the problem, we have to recognize there is a problem. And the last thing they have on here for the U.S. Department of Agriculture for their categories of food insecurity is very low food security. Very low food security. And what that means is reduced food intake and disrupted eating patterns due to lack of money or other resources. Basically, you don't have access to any food. You're broke. You have no money. You can't buy food. And so you have to resort to like food banks or feeding centers and things like that, or folks that are out there, doing the right thing and putting their best foot forward and try to feed families out there who are struggling. These are folks that find themselves in those situations where there is no food. You literally depend on the available resources. Other factors that can contribute to food insecurity is obviously, you talk about the income. I talk about employment, having a job or not, disability. Whether you're disabled. Limited mobility certainly plays a part into that, because you can't go out and get the foods you want. You have to actually accept the foods that are given to you if you have limited mobility. So unfortunately, sometimes the foods given to you is not the most nutritious meals. Neighborhood conditions are another factor for food security. And when I say neighborhood conditions, this is one that it chaps my ass, really, because oftentimes in impoverished neighborhoods or lower economic producing neighborhoods, the poor neighborhoods, you literally sometimes don't find grocery stores. There are no grocery stores. There are no available fresh fruits and vegetables. So to eat nutritious meals is almost impossible. Now keep in mind, you're talking about folks with limited resources. So to get fresh fruits and vegetables or go to a decent store where they can get the foods they need, they have to have transportation to do that. And there has to be gas in that transportation or a bus. So that's an extra cost on top of not being able to eat properly, not being able to eat enough, and not being able to eat nutritiously. You have to throw money on top of that just to get to that point. And that's we in America. We should be ashamed as a country because we're one of the most richest countries in the world. But food insecurity in this country is unbelievable. I saw it firsthand working at the Department of Agriculture for Texas and also dealing with the federal level Department of Agriculture. I saw firsthand how many kids really suffer from hunger. They suffer from hunger. I saw firsthand the despicable acts of some kids going into schools. I'm talking young kids, elementary and middle school kids. They go to schools and then they don't have enough money to go through the lunch line with the tray, and then the lady accepting the money basically tells them to put their tray back because they can't afford. It's embarrassing. They can't afford to get food. Some schools have created budgets for children like that to make sure they are treated just like the other kids as much as possible. But man, you have some cold-hearted people out there. I've heard a lot of stories about the cafeteria workers out there denying kids food just because they couldn't afford it, whether it's 75 cents or $1, the cheap amount to get just the basic foods. But it's a real problem out there. Hunger in America is a real problem. A lot of people are going hungry every day. A lot of kids are going to bed without food every day. I think it's something we really need to pay attention to and understand this also has an impact on your mental health well-being, Because if you're hungry, your mind starts playing all kinds of tricks on you. Try going without food for a week, period, and watch what start happening to your mental capacity. I'm not saying it will decline, but there will be changes. And for a child, I think those changes can be dangerous because they're already going through the developmental stages. So food insecurity definitely has an impact on mental health. For one, you're worried about where you're going to get your next meal. And if you don't have food in your stomach, then you can't think properly. Your brain needs the nutrition just like your heart, just like every other organ and thing in your body. They need that nutrition. If you can't get it, it's not going to operate properly. So I think that's something we really need to pay attention to. It's a crisis here in America. It's always been here. But now it's gone through the roof because the resources are limited. Food banks are drying up. Feeding centers are disappearing. Tariffs are going through the roof. Unemployment is going up. Job losses are going up. And kids are continuing to go hungry each night. Shame on us.